With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. This is part 2 of our series on what love is.
I mean, we call it part 2. I don't know how many parts this is going to be. We could talk about this till Jesus returns. I was going to say till the cows come home, but...
Yeah, better. Till Jesus comes back, which, by the way, will be a very loving thing when He does. Yeah, we've been exploring again, and I asked SJ to jump into this water with me again, just because God's teaching me some more on what it is to be loved by Him and how transformative, how healing, and what kind of training is actually all kind of bound up in that, SJ. The stories that we mentioned in the part 1 of the series, but came to me again, The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy and her journey with wisdom, love, and courage, and how those 3 companions run together, the lion and the scarecrow and the Tin Man. And, you know, what happened to the Tin Man is a fascinating story in the book, The Wizard of Oz. He was in love with a Munchkin woman. The Wicked Witch was jealous, angry, and so she put a curse on his axe. And it, I mean, pretty
she cursed his axe.
Yeah, cursed his axe. and pretty graphically in the book, he chopped his arm off.
Right.
And he chops a leg off. And, you know, it's a children's book.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you're going, when was he going to figure this out? Like, It wasn't a good idea to keep swinging that thing.
And so he loses the love of his life. And along the way, he loses his heart. And they're talking about going and seeing the wizard at this point. He is the Tin Man, and he wants a heart because he wants to love again. And that's what he's going to ask the Wizard of Oz for. I just relate to that. I want my heart back. I want God to love me back to life, resurrect me, right? Redeem, restore, heal, and in the process, train me in how to love others because I've experienced that love from Him. Yes, people's stories, and we're going to talk about in this episode a little bit about listening. But I want to start, SJ, with just a couple things about the greatest commandment. Remember when Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment? He pulls a verse, not out of Exodus and the 10 Commandments. He pulls a verse out of Deuteronomy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're trying to trick him, of course. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Matthew says heart, soul, mind. Luke says heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I think this wasn't just one conversation he had. You know, I think we tend to think that the scriptures, like that's the only time he said that. No.
I'm sure he got asked that over and over again.
You and I will tell stories to 3 different tables of 3 different friends or family, or we'll tell our parents and then we'll tell our spouse or vice versa, and then we'll tell our friends. I mean, stories or discoveries will make the circuit sometimes. So my point is, if those are the things that we're to love with, then I really do believe, SJ, then those are the things that need attention, that need God's attention, that we need to give care for our heart, mind, body, and soul. It's very hard to love. We were talking about it in the first episode. If you're depressed, if you're hurting, if you're physiologically, if you're mentally hurting, you know, remember a couple of weeks ago, I got that infection and it took me out. I wasn't unloving, but I sure wasn't in a place of...
Right, you didn't have the capacity.
The capacity,
Yeah,
yes.
Your body was physically fighting off.
So honestly, just for a week, that's true. But if your body's in constant pain or you're in chronic physical pain, it's going to be very challenging
to
be loving.
Same way if you're in emotional distress, trauma, all of that.
So self-care
inhibits your ability.
Self-care in all 4 of those lanes are really, really important, I believe, in order to be able to offer anything that's loving and caring and kind And yet it's when one of those areas or all of them are somehow hurting, that's when I need loving care. That's when I need the attention of God, of others, to come back, to see this comeback. And so initially, when we're talking about a collection of wounding messages, wounding moments, people not handling our hearts well, conditional love, a performance life, dude, there's plenty to recover from. Lots to come back from.
What happens to us, and then how the people that were maybe with good intention or not, how those people were trying to help us with what happened to us. Think about it for a minute. The number of people that are hurting, okay, well, it's a 100% injury rate.
Yeah, in humanity, right?
Yeah. How many people are there that are in a position to really help when you're in that state?
Yeah.
Especially I'm talking about emotional, mental abuse, trauma, any of that. And that's a wide statement. We often think of emotional abuse or trauma being, I got locked in the basement and, fed through a slot, my food. I mean, that kind of trauma, that's an obvious thing, but there can be trauma of my dad was never home.
Mm-hmm.
My mom never said she loved me. I mean, those are traumatic events. So I think there's two parts to that. We often, and I say we, including myself, will downplay what's happened to us. And then it's a rare thing that any one of us had someone that could really love us in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Even as we revisit that moment and try to get free and healthy and whole from it, it's a rare thing. We have someone that can do that.
It takes me right to this passage, bro, in John 13. Jesus answers their question, what's the greatest commandment, right? Love Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Great. Yes. Well, you move into the Gospel of John, and as you come to the later innings, the later moments of Jesus's life, he's starting to get a little more serious with his friends, the disciples, and he really wants them to get it. So he says in John 13:34, I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, so you too are to love one another. I believe that what you were talking about just now, SJ, is what Jesus actually did when he says, as I've loved you. They had 3 some years with him. They had experience with him. They had conversations where, it wasn't just like a football huddle moving down the path and him in the middle. No, he sat by one, then he sat by the other. Hey, let's go get some wood. Hey, come with me. How you doing? I believe that. We just get these cliff notes in Scripture, but I think this one points towards when he said that to those guys, each one of them drew on their personal experience with him and probably raised their eyebrows and went, whoa, you want me to love like that?
Yeah, hang on a second, right? That's what they're saying. Hang on a second. Like that? And that's what we see Jesus do, though, right? He fulfills the law.
Mm-hmm.
He fulfills whatever is said will be done in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus fulfills it.
He checks the box, right?
So he goes back to Deuteronomy, like you're talking about. That's sort of the starting place.
Mm-hmm.
Love God, love your neighbor.
And then some crazy stuff like love your enemies. And,
yes,
right? If someone hurts you, takes your coat, hits one cheek, give them the other.
Give them the other, turn the other cheek.
Wow.
Yes. So there is some challenge there.
Mm-hmm.
Challenge in the sense of you guys haven't been living that way. So maybe you ought to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think what you're talking about, Michael, is sort of a next step. It's a next level. It's a next, I don't know how to describe it other than it goes beyond that first admonition of love God, love your neighbor.
Yes. And it goes back to your question from the first episode of the series that as I've loved you, I want you to draw from the well that I dug in you.
Yeah, and I want you to go beyond the basic of just follow the law, follow the 10 commandments, right? I want you to take it deeper.
Yeah.
I want you to explore this further in your own heart with me so then you can bring me in that deeper way to other folks. So you were talking about shallow waters. And you can't get to the deeper water without wading through the shallow waters, right? I mean,
or walking on it if that's how Jesus wants to roll.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I love the idea, though, and actually subscribe to it in this faith journey of letting him love me, taking things out of the way that aren't me, that aren't good, that somehow, some way have entered my story, and then entrusting him with where I'm at and where I'm going. This idea of just as I've loved you, so you too are to love one another. These experiences where Jesus is meeting us, because I've done what you read about C.S. Lewis. I have done that. There's parts of my heart, anyway, that I have cornered off. I have police tape around. No one's going to touch this again. This hurt too much, too bad. The trauma you use.
I think if we're being honest, all of us.
Yeah. And so
have done that to a degree.
So to have him go after parts of my inability to trust, parts of my ability to self-protect, which is related to trust, to be honest with where I'm at. And we've all learned there's not many people that you can trust with that, who aren't going to tell you how to think or how to feel or tell you their experience, if that makes sense. And so I want to go back to, as I have loved you, so you too are to love one another. I want to know more about what that's about. And I believe we can learn more and experience more about what that's about by literally letting Jesus love us and how he does that. I mean, that is just a headline, SJ, and an invitation. As I've loved you, so you are to love one another. What does that look like for me? What does that look like for you? What's that look like for Robin and Sherry? And what's that look like for our children? Because ultimately, if they are being loved, experiencing love, and able to acknowledge it, connecting the dots, having not only an experience, but understanding that the experience of love that they're having is actually with God, that is going to impact their ability then to love others and care for others. So I want to open up this next can of worms about listening and what we've been learning about listening, but I want to do it before the break. So that's where we're going. What does that mean, as I have loved you? What might that mean? What are we learning about what that means to you, your heart and journey, SJ, and mine? And I want to talk about that when we come back on the Exploring More podcast. We'll be right back.
Marriage may be the most sacred of all human relationships. Two people coming together as one. There may not be anything more powerful than two people walking with God together. It's kind of mind-boggling, actually. And because of the power and weight of marriage in the kingdom, it should not come as any surprise that marriage is violently opposed. It's a favorite target of the enemy. We believe this is why you don't have to look very far to find a marriage that's in trouble. Challenges to marriage are everywhere. But we know there's a way for couples to make a comeback, learn how to fight back, enjoy being restored, and actually thrive in the midst of the day-to-day battles of life. Marriage is worth fighting for, and having the right weapons and tools, training, and orientation is crucial. That's why we created the Rendezvous Project, a 12-session video series recorded live during one of our recent Rendezvous Weekend marriage conferences. Through the Rendezvous Project, we hope to empower redemptive marriages to either take a weekend away together and host your own marriage retreat, or journey together in a weekly small group, discovering your true heart, the deep and beautiful heart of your marriage, the context of the larger story your marriage is in, and how to walk intimately with God together. Learn more about the Rendezvous Project at therendezvousproject.com.
Welcome back, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. I'm going to try 15, 20 minutes to land this thing, but it's inexhaustible because we're talking about love. And when you're talking about the kingdom, you got to talk about love sooner or later, and probably with regular frequency, because it is a headline, major, significant, primary part of the kingdom and what it is to become a kingdom man or a kingdom woman is to be loved. And so, SJ, this passage, John 13, he talks about it again in John 15, like I said, is he's bringing the disciples around a corner that he's going to leave, and the Holy Spirit's going to take his place in one regard, but Jesus is going to be with them. Lo, I'm with you always, right? But here he's trying to get across to them some of the final instruction, this new commandment. And so love one another, just as I have loved you. So what you and I have been learning about listening and caring for one another's heart has to be in this program, has to be in this university of love that Jesus is saying, all right, I want you to love people like I've loved you. And in that is got to be this listening, caring, empathy. Tell me your sorrows. Tell me your tale, your song. Tell me your story. Where does it hurt? And then it's wherever he goes from there. Probably one of the best times in an image bearer's life is when this, whatever system they've created, when it collapses, when it doesn't work.
Yeah, when it doesn't satisfy anymore. Or yeah, I agree.
When somebody comes along and doesn't buy it.
Yeah.
When somebody is critical of this thing that you have offered the world or has a hold of you in a way that, all right, this system works most of the time. And the best thing is when that system crashes and you get to take it in, hopefully to the Father for repair. And he says, yeah, I don't want to fix that one. I want to give you a new one.
Yeah, that's typically redemption, right? I mean, you're trading in something old and getting something new that's different.
So here's some things not to do. Here's some things we've been learning about. If listening is loving, and one of the most loving things we can do is listen. I want to dive a little deeper into that, SJ, for our listeners, for what we've been learning. I can remember being taught, I literally can remember being taught in counseling circles, counseling training, how to listen in a couple of these things. And I'm just kind of cringing because I used to do this.
The methodology for really digging what they're really talking about.
Yeah. So while you're listening, you're trying to listen and think of biblical passages. Because usually in some Christian counseling circles, I was trained to listen for sin and then give appropriate, biblical direction, biblical prescriptions.
The antidote.
Yeah, man.
The biblical antidote to your problem.
Yeah. And
I wish you listeners could see Michael's face. It looks like he's sucking on a lemon.
What's on my tongue right now is it was sold, SJ, as concerning, but I look back and go, no, it was judging. It was judgmental. It was corrective.
Yeah.
And I'm looking to fix a problem rather than to enter into somebody's pain.
Yeah, that's a person.
I know.
It's not. No, I'm not saying that to you. I'm saying to the listeners. I'm not judging you, Michael, much.
No,
I'm not, because I did it too. I got nouthetically trained, right? As biblical counseling. I mean, so I get it, man. And I mean, I think it's really interesting that you started this podcast with the Wizard of Oz, because the Tin Man lost his heart. He wants the heart. And the Scarecrow needs a brain, and the Lion lost his courage. But what's interesting is it's all about the heart.
Mm.
Courage comes from the heart. Its root word is the heart.
Yeah,
the French word for heart. And even the Scarecrow wants wisdom, right? Mm-hmm. Where does wisdom come from? A wise and discerning heart. So anyway, that's really interesting that the heart is central. But I think about the Tin Man. He's a machine at that point, right?
Right.
And so these people that are sitting across from us are not tin. It's not like we're trying to figure out, is it the alternator or is it the battery or is it the ground, wire or what it is. They're people.
Yeah. So on this list of some things to not do, right? It's writing prescriptions, right? These kinds of words, they should not come out of a listener's heart who's trying to love, okay?
Okay, if I can, before we give this list, all right? You can find a list of how to listen well and do it just like we're talking about with biblical scriptural training. I mean, you can be trained how to listen well, starting with the list that we're starting with.
Yeah.
But if you have not taken some of this journey and been heard, If you haven't had someone listen this way to you, it's going to be really hard for you to pull it off, listeners. I just want to say that.
Well, some of the things on my list, SJ, are things that I've experienced from other people that I thought would listen to me, and they suck at it. You know? So my own experience, too, is the positive thinkers. Well, at least you got your other arm.
Yeah, right.
You know, or
the silver lining people.
At least you got the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
There's more fish in the sea.
Mm-hmm.
That's not untrue.
That doesn't make it helpful.
But it doesn't make it helpful. And when there's pain, you're right, you want somebody to sit in that and carry that with you. So, yeah, the biblical prescription, don't do that. The positive thinking, steer clear of that. Another one is, I remember being trained in this idea that, well, as you're listening to their story, hopefully you can think of one of your own to relate to them.
Yeah. Okay, all I can think of right now is Brian Regan trying to tell a tale where he had 2 wisdom teeth taken out.
Yeah, the comedian.
And he's like, don't ever try to tell a 2 wisdom tooth, because someone that's had 4 wisdom teeth taken out is going to cut you off at the back.
Swoop in.
And that's what that feels like when you're like,
it's brutal.
You know, someone's bearing their soul to you and you say, you know,
yeah,
well, let me tell you what happened to me.
Yeah. It's kind of that ain't nothing, you know,
yeah.
And we laugh, but oh my gosh, you
so
watch
harmful.
people do it.
They shut down.
And now the person that was trying to confide and so courageous and being vulnerable is now having to listen to somebody else's pain, their story, and now they're getting heated up or sad. And now the person
totally
who's drowning,
the
person who's drowning is having to get the life preserver to the trusted counselor.
We'll all go down together, buddy, you know?
Yeah. Well, at least you know, that whole thing. So I would summarize some of this comedy that's not so funny in watch how you're being invited. Listeners, you're going to get a lot of chances to practice this. Lots.
Sure. Yeah.
But watch what comes out of you or comes up in you. Do you feel the need to make that person feel better? And if so, it's 95% so you can feel better.
Yeah.
And we call that codependency. So you're really not listening from a caring or a pure or a whole place. You know, you can't handle the weight of people's pain. Well, you know what that means, SJ? You've never handled yours.
That's right.
And so to tell people how to think or to tell people what to feel is a very dangerous space to go. And I would say it's in the shallow end, but there's enough there to drown you and them.
Oh, it takes 2 inches of water to drown somebody.
And you'll actually reinforce wounding.
Yeah.
Well, you know what you ought to do? Or, well, if I were you, or, well, I hear you, but let me tell you what happened to me. I mean, that kind of listening is unloving.
Well, the one that you mentioned
unhelpful.
That is really stuck in my mind right now is telling people how to feel. We do it all the time. I mean, I catch myself more and more before it comes out of my mouth.
Me too.
I do it, man. You shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, don't say that.
Which I get it, man. We're trying to, in a sense, be helpful. Like, you shouldn't believe that about yourself.
Well, we're listening. Honestly, we're listening for wounds, vows, and agreements.
Yeah.
We are.
And we can get to that place where we can share the truth, but telling them in that moment, you shouldn't feel that way, it's just like...
illegitimizing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And not a great idea.
And it actually gives a little scent of shame and a little bit of judgment.
Sure.
That now this person that they hoped was safe is just kind of joining the choir of critics.
You're doing it wrong. If you knew more of the Bible, if you loved God more, you'd be great. I mean,
so let's switch to some helpful things.
Yeah, and listeners, maybe, shoot us an email and let us know other things that we left out.
Yeah, there's more
listening practices.
There's more unhealthy.
Yeah.
I'm watching our time trying to land on time a little bit. But I think some of the contrast of even what to do, if you contrast that, that's helpful. So I think one of the most loving things we can do in listening, and I'm still talking about as I have loved you, what might that have looked like?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know from a lot of Jesus's dialogue, he liked to ask questions. He liked to help people discover for themselves the truth. Now, he told the truth. There's no doubt about that. He taught the truth. No doubt about that. But there are a lot of question marks in the Gospels. If you have a red inked Bible and you can kind of look at the question marks, he asks a lot of questions.
Yeah, maybe do a Google search of questions
Jesus asked. Right?
know?
Right.
And think about the woman at the well. I mean, he could have come right out and said, I know everything about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're not fooling me. Who do you think you are?
You know what you need to do is...
Yeah.
But he's asking her questions. And there's other examples too. But you're right, Michael. That's
Mary
a great
and Martha.
place to start.
He's asked Martha, which one's better?
Right.
And so this cultivation that he's after, of discernment, of desire, he wants to kind of woo that to the surface. So my point is, when I'm listening to you, SJ, or you're listening to me, I'm hopeful that there'll be the kind of engagement that you're not declaring that you understand what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. And I really haven't gotten much into the story yet, but you're asking questions to take me deeper into the story, even deeper into the incident. Like in the moment, SJ, I'm thinking of questions like, tell me more about your relationship then with your mom, or tell me more about this journey that you've had with your brother.
Or tell me, what year are we in right now?
Right.
When did this happen? I mean,
right.
Actually, that's a great way to hone skills, is to ask simpler questions like that.
Yeah.
Yes, what you were saying, 100%, but I've found that was helpful to just clarifying questions.
The journalism type questions, I'm not trying to write a story and publish this. I actually want to know your story and enter into it. So the who, the why, the what, and you got to be careful that you're not interrupting and going after clarification. But is that normal for your dad to be like that? Is that something that you've dealt with over, or is this kind of new?
Mm-hmm.
That's so different than, well, at least you had a dad. My dad left.
Or my dad used to
My
do
dad
that.
left when I was 5, and he da-da-da-da-da.
Here's what he
and
means by that.
Right? All of a sudden, I just shot that one in there.
We do it all the time, though, man. It's true.
But I believe that when, even in my encounters with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in prayer and conversation, SJ, my experience is they ask me questions. When I am going after healing, or when some kind of reaction comes up in me and I'm like, okay, whoa, what is that about? And I turn to the Father and say, yeah, that wasn't good.
Right.
Back to the Beatitudes. I wanted to kill her. I wanted to kill him.
Right.
I thought about, that's how intense that was. What's that about?
Or the Holy Spirit says, what's that about?
Yeah.
What was that about?
And it can be this, okay, well, where in your story have you experienced this before?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Or
ain't nobody got time for that. I got stuff I got to do.
Could you just fix that person?
Yes.
Could you just get them straightened out?
No, but that's great. I mean, there are times where, Michael, you hear those things, and that's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Where in your story have you experienced this before? And the other thing I want to say about listening too, while I'm thinking about it, based on the way that you just described that, timing means a lot, right? Trying to engage someone in their story while you're in a car with 3 other people, or you're on your way to do something else.
Yeah.
You really got to make space for and allot time for them to share with you.
And there's some really great questions, SJ, just like that are practical. Like, hey, do you mind if I listen and take some notes? I just want to really honor this, and I won't give them to anybody, but it just helps me listen, and I want to really track with you.
Yeah.
That's kind. Or if you don't have time, this is really important what you're saying. I was in the middle of something. Can I wrap that up? And then we jump in.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
I have availability on Tuesday.
I have a
from
couple
11 to 12.
It sounds almost cruel. Like, okay, I can't deal with this right now. That's not the reality that we're learning. We've been learning that the reality
I think it's honoring.
is to say, could I give you a couple hours in this slot? Are you free tomorrow afternoon? Because I feel like if we get started, I don't want to stop. I want to be with you in it. Would that be okay? Will you be okay? until then. Very, very helpful, caring, especially if they're in a bad space. Honestly, you think you're leaving them when in reality, you're giving them something to look forward to, and even arrange, like, man, how many of us have been at a lunch or a breakfast with somebody and it turns into the deeper water?
Sure.
And you're at Chick-fil-A and there's people all around, hey, SJ, do you want to go sit out in the truck and talk about this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I really want you to feel, oh, I don't care where we go. Okay, then okay. Then I can say, well,
sounds like something I'd say.
How about for my heart we go?
Yeah.
Because I think this is really, really important.
And sometimes there can be too, Michael, I think about in the resources we've created, we adapted something called the story timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Even saying, hey, I'd love to meet with you for a couple hours next week. Take this.
Yeah.
It'll help you to organize your story and your thoughts. And then when we get back together, we'll have a real timeline we can follow and it'll be clear. I mean, those things sound, like you said, formal, and, waiting until you have a larger block of time feels like it might not be kind, but it's really been my experience on both sides of the coin that it feels honoring to that person that you would do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more you practice good questions, the more it's just, as you learn to do that, as you learn to ask good questions, I believe it will enable you to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, I love what you said, at the right time. And unfortunately, you don't give way to the idea that everything has to be fixed in 2 hours or everything has to be arranged for, in an hour. But
that's unreasonable.
It's unreasonable. These are weighty things. These are deeper things. These are important things. And it might be that you can spend more time with them later. You can spend a series of appointments with them. But, I think sooner or later, you may have to bring somebody else in. You may have to involve some kind of care, which is always good to have a good counselor or two that you might know personally or from someone. We get calls all the time. Do you know somebody? Do you know somebody? And the answer now on our journey is yes.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have been to that person, or they speak at our conferences, or, we're connected at the heart and on the ground with this mission. I think they would be really good for you. I love putting people in the hands of good care of people that we know have learned how to love well.
Yeah.
And what I hope is, as you said, SJ, in the question, as we're loved well by those who have become apprentices with God on this, the tending to our hearts is actually the training for our hearts, for the hearts of others. And you don't have to rush the field on that. You don't have to arrange for that or make it happen. But what we found over and over again is the heartache and hardship that many have suffered as they experience healing, they become options in the kingdom, candidates in the kingdom, caregivers in the kingdom for people with similar stories.
Oh, yeah.
And what's wild is the person that you're listening to, you don't have to tell them your story. They will see it in your eyes, in your way. They will come. They may even ask you, you seem to know what this looks and what this feels like. Have you ever had any experience with this? I mean, right? We go to Goodwill Hunting.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
and then you
ever had any experience with this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to say, Michael, this sounds a little bit like we're trying to train people to counsel. We're trying to train people to listen.
Just to listen.
And then if it gets to the point where you feel like it's out of your depth, that's when you just honestly tell somebody that and find a good counselor that knows how to do what we're talking about. But there is a time and a place where it can turn, to your point, it can turn conversational.
Yeah.
But leaving the space for that person to share whatever it is they want to share.
Yeah.
And then when they start asking questions in return, it's really a beautiful turn.
Right.
In that conversation.
And when that's your wife or your daughter or your son or one of your friends, now there's an exchange. Now there's a connection. Now there's let's go back to Chuck Willery, a love connection. There's a love connection, man. And that's why we wanted to explore this some more. It's what we're made for. It's what the world needs. It's what there is unfortunately a constant barrage of the enemy, fear, guilt, and shame, steal, kill, and destroy. All of that is in the context of love. And so if we become oriented men, oriented women who understand that in this battle for the heart, this is what it's about, we can become dangerous for good. We can become part of the team of good guys.
Yeah.
Of good women, good men who are good for the hearts of others.
I think there's way more to talk about. So I don't think this would be part 2 of a 2-part series. We can probably get back in here as we kind of ruminate on what we've shared already and what God might have more for us to share, I mean,
we'll call it more to come.
We'll see.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, friends and allies. More to come on this thing called love, and how eventually the question is how. How does it look? How do we do it? How does God do it? And maybe we can fill a few more podcasts with that, SJ.
Yeah, absolutely. Listeners, I want to encourage you, if you've got questions or comments for us, shoot us an email at exploringmore@zoweh.org. And if you'd leave a rate and review on the podcast platform of your choice, we would surely appreciate it, and it would help us to get found, help this message to be found. So thank you for doing that, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.